Hi, my name's Abbie Steinbacher. I live in Silicon Valley in California. I am a mom. I am a marketer. I work in tech. And previous to that, I've done all sorts of things and excited to chat a little bit with you about them today.
Wonderful. So good to see you, Abby. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. I'm very excited to hear about your journey and what brought you into the wonderful world of tech and how education factors into that. And I know that there's so much more as well as you've gone through your journey that kind of led you to do what you are currently working on. I know that marketing ties into it in some capacity. But then, yeah, as a mom, I know you've also worked on like other projects and like, initiatives that tie into these interests that I think will be really wonderful to unpack together. And of course, thinking about how those various interests and passions of yours tie into this concept of global citizenship. I'm very excited. And to kick us off, it would be great if you can share a little bit more about what were the origins of this interest of yours in education. Perhaps it didn't really look like too explicitly as like this is going to lead me to education, but maybe kind of share some initial influences, a few really pivotal and important moments in your career trajectory, and yeah, and just kind of bring us up to speed about what's currently
Yeah,
on.
for sure. Well, I definitely didn't want to be in education when I was growing up and thinking about what I wanted to do. I think if you had asked me, I would have said I want to write a kids show or a kids book or something along those lines. But my parents were both teachers and loved that. I loved growing up with them as teachers. In fact, I had aunts and uncles that were teachers, and so that was kind of our industry and everything that I knew. And so I think what I did know is I just wanted to do something different. But what I didn't realize is that I'd kind of circle back. And so after graduating from college, I went into finance. I went to Harvard as an undergrad, and there felt like there were two tracks when you graduate, at least when I was there. Either you go into finance or you go into consulting. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go into finance. And I got a job somehow, and I ended up in finance for about 2 years and decided that it wasn't really fulfilling. I didn't really like it, and had this kind of uh, thing came up. So I had jury duty, which ended up coming up about two years along into my finance. It ended up being a 5 week case, and during that time, I was able to reflect on how I didn't really like what I was doing and put together a business plan for starting a kids yoga company. So by the time I came back to after the trial was over, I had given them my notice and let them know that at the end of the year I'd be leaving. And it was a little bit scary. I didn't really have a strong background in yoga, but I was a swimmer growing up, and swimming meant everything to me. And so I feel like swimming actually really supported me in so many different ways. And I felt so lucky to have that in my life. But it felt like it just was on a whim that I found it. And I wanted to give other kids some way of getting in touch with their own body and their own uh, physicalness and how that balances you out in certain ways. And so thought kids yoga would be a good way for me to move forward.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I mean, there's like so many different twists and turns, and I appreciate that your family comes from this, area of education, and you were hoping to be rebellious, and yet inevitably it brought you back.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a few things that I wanted to kind of like, touch on and like hear a little bit more about. One of them that you just mentioned was that you were a swimmer. And
Mhm.
I was a swimmer as well. I feel like we bonded
Wow,
over.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, well yeah, very
We could
cool.
definitely bond over this. And
Yes.
and it was, a pretty big part of my life as well. I swam in college, as I'm sure you did as
Yes.
well. And
Yes.
I'm just curious, like, what were some of like the big life lessons that you learned as a swimmer?
Oh, so many. I look back now, even in the world of tech, which is like, a very can be cutthroat, fast pace. And I just think all of my training from swimming about, learning how to put in hard work and work hard, play hard, and set aside time to get everything else done because swimming is super demanding. And you need to figure out how to prioritize. And yeah, I think that that was what I really appreciated about swimming. I also, in college, found out that I have ADHD, which I obviously have all my life. But I didn't find out until I stopped swimming my senior year in college after the season was over. And I think looking back, swimming is what kept my ADHD symptoms while they were still there at bay. And so I was so grateful for the swimming that kept me, gave me something to keep my body active, keep my mind busy. And so, kind of actually, what I was just saying before about me swimming being my thing and me wanting to give kids a thing, it kind of gave me that oomph to push in the direction of what some other kids who may not know, maybe they learn differently, maybe they think differently, and or have lots of energy, how to self-regulate. So
Yeah, no, one of the things that I really appreciate about swimming is how it teaches you discipline. And you alluded to this, right, by saying that, you have to put in a lot of hard work, and you have to fit it into your schedule, and you just have to show up. I think that's so important. Oftentimes, I'll have like maybe a flashback to when I was, it's like 5 a.m. and I'm like in my like Speedo looking down
yeah,
at the water and sun hasn't even like risen and you're just asking yourself, why am I doing this? It's so
yes,
cold and I'm just going to swim
yes,
back and forth in a pool. But,
yes,
it's really important to have that thing in your life.
yes.
And so you mentioned that, swimming, like you've been swimming since you were very little, and in many ways, like it was teaching you all of these life lessons, but it also, in a way, masked something like that was kind of always within you, right? The
Hmm.
ADHD, and then suddenly you kind of had this awakening of like, wow, like now I'm no longer like let's say um, swimming for a team, and you had to transition like kind of to a different chapter, and then seeing
Hmm.
how like swimming could play a role in that, or kind of trying something different, and then reckoning
Right.
like what was that transition like for you? Because I know that can be really tough for athletes, especially those
Yeah.
in a high competition.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think that there was definitely an identity crisis that happens when you have your last swim meet and you're like, okay, I knew myself as a swimmer. Other people knew me as a swimmer. And so what am I now? And even as that was my senior year and I was getting my degree in psychology. But when I thought about what I should do, even though I knew in my world there were only two tracks that were acceptable, but I was like, well, really, the only thing I'm qualified to be is a swim coach. So that was like, it was very hard for me to figure out what I was really well trained enough to move on and do. But athletics and fitness has continued to be a steady part of my life. I crave it, and I feel like as I learned, like even though I wasn't competing anymore in swimming, I knew that the exercise like is really good, not just for my body, but for my mind. And so I'm still super always seeking out new ways to exercise and making sure to prioritize that because I like to say tell that nobody wants to be around me if I haven't exercised, and so I just keep it at that.
Just like some people, you don't want to be around them if they haven't had their cup of coffee, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I like that you mentioned the identity piece of it because I think that's so important. I mean, as human beings, right, navigating this life, we're trying to make sense of what is it that, we're doing, right? What kind of value are we creating from our actions and from this sense of like, I'm connected with the people in my community, with my family. Um, but there's like always these kind of like push and pull factors of like, am I doing the right thing? Am I going in the right
Yeah.
path? And I
Right.
appreciate that, you thought about like, well, what are my current skills? Is it just to become a swim coach, or can I think beyond that? And not to say that being a swim coach is a bad thing, but I mean, I think that there's just so much more for us to like really look at contributing towards. And yeah, and it's really interesting how like, that time of like reflection was very important for you. And then also you mentioned the jury duty. I love how you put a positive, spin to that. Normally people are like not happy about jury duty.
I loved jury duty, but I was at an age where I didn't really have many responsibilities. I was still getting paid for my job. So it's just a time. It was almost like sitting and watching a movie about, true crime or something along those lines. So it's just very interesting and a new experience as like a 20 something year old.
Totally.
So,
Yeah, but I mean, it led you to take a risk, right? And
yeah.
starting your own company with children's yoga. But yeah, well, could you speak a little bit more? Like in those 5 weeks, like yes, you had time to reflect, but I mean, who came up? Like, was there a friend who said, "Hey, yoga," or did you yoga class? Or
No, I had been thinking already that I think the jury duty is what gave me the time and the space to actually convince myself this was the right thing to do. I had been, as I had just stopped swimming all of the time, looking like experimenting with yoga and other things. So I was doing yoga myself. I had done a training around kids yoga, and so I was lightly trained. But I actually first had thought about should going back to the idea of swimming, should I start like a swimming teaching thing? And I honestly, it was just that the overhead was too high and the too many insurances of starting that. And for some reason, starting a kids yoga studio felt a little bit more approachable. You just really need a big open space. And so my 23-year-old self decided that I would just rent a space actually in Newton, Massachusetts. So, and yeah, go for it. So it was very, looking back on it now as my 41-year-old self with two kids and a husband, I don't think I would have been able to have that same freedom. So I'm glad that I took the chance then. But I don't regret ever going into finance. I think that it is just a really good reminder to me of like, yes, I could have continued down that path, but I always reflect on that as what in that journey, like you were talking about, that identity of like, what am I doing the right thing I'm supposed to be doing? I feel like I'm every decision is getting me closer to what it is that I'm supposed to be doing. And knowing that I needed something that felt more impactful, like I was helping people. And I didn't feel like I was doing that in my role in finance, it has been something I always keep with me in the back of my mind as I make decisions moving forward. So,
Mm. Yeah, no, that's great. And I love that you were able to find something, create something, but find that path, and be able to like make such a strong personal connection to it. And that, yeah, it's not swimming, but it's still that, sense of like identity building of like, how do you feel within your own body? And then kind of like charting new paths forward, especially at such a young age, right? I mean, like our formative years are so important. It really sets us for like what we will achieve decades down the line, right? Into our 50s and 60s and beyond.
yeah.
So, this children's yoga company, it sounds like it's um, something very special to you. How long did you have this company for? Like, and what were some of like the early years? Like,
Yeah,
what was that
great
like to start
questions.
something like that?
So I started it when I was 23. It started as a kids yoga studio in Newton, like I mentioned. I was super surprised when people showed up the first day for the first classes. I didn't really know what to expect. I had done some guerrilla marketing and I had built out my own curriculum. So I think part of what I really loved about it, and even though I didn't grow up as a yogi necessarily, but a swimmer, but I was able to apply my creativity to it. At the time, I know kids yoga is relatively big now, but at the time, kids yoga was very hard to find, almost something that people didn't even know that it existed. And so I was able to kind of build this story-based kids yoga curriculum. And I really loved the most, I would say, working with like the preschool age group, but I offered classes for all the different kids age groups. And to start with, it was just at my kids yoga studio. And then over time, because kids yoga was hard to find, the word got out, and preschools and daycares and schools and started calling and asking if I would come out or my teachers would come out. So I started built a curriculum for a teacher training for kids yoga, where I would train teachers. Some of them were educators who would go in and bring yoga into their own classrooms. Some of them went on to be hired by me or other yoga studios and would go on like every week to go, if you can imagine, like visit a preschool and teach 30 minutes in every classroom there. And just really, it was more on like trying to bridge between education and entertainment, and people say edutainment. And so it was kind of this approach at the time, because yoga was for kids was a little bit unknown. There were many misconceptions about yoga, maybe being extra religious or something that didn't belong in schools. And so the approach was really like, how do we surprise and delight and have fun, teach the concepts of yoga, but not make it overtly that it becomes an uncomfortable place for anyone. And so I think by trying to figure out, how to get kids who have tons of energy, like I did as a kid, how to get all their energy out and then find this moment of calm. And at the end, doing this relaxation. And we would leave, and the teachers or the parents would always be like, oh my goodness, I've never seen my kids so, so engaged and then so calm. So it was really rewarding. And so that was me creeping into that educator space, closer and closer, even though I wasn't a classroom teacher, going in. And I was actually really lucky that I not only visited schools and daycares, we did festivals, but even got to work with the New England Aquarium. They wanted to do a Fitness Friday day every month, where families who were visiting would learn a little bit about fitness. So we got to build a curriculum where we would do yoga with the SEALs, and the SEALs would kind of do a yoga as I was doing it, and then the audience would come in and try it too. So got to do lots of fun things that were creative and just spread the word about yoga and fitness and getting people to try something new. So
Well, that sounds like so much fun. And yeah, you're a pioneer in that sense, like for the time, right? Relatively unknown, and there were misconceptions, and you were able to really bridge, right, that gap between, educating them about how they can feel within their body, and trust their body, but also having fun, which I think
yeah.
especially for kids, like, that's kind of like their job. Like your job is to go out
Yes,
and play, and
totally. Yeah.
because through that they learn and
Yeah. And
sort of.
the most rewarding thing was if a parent would say, oh, you're the yoga teacher. My kid is at home and they're always like pretending to teach me yoga. I was like, oh, well, that's perfect. That's how I know that it's working or that they're enjoying it and liking it too. So,
Yeah, they're so passionate about it and they're excited. They want to share that. And so yeah, the person who didn't want to be a teacher inadvertently went on
yes.
to like produce even more teachers and train teachers. It's just that's wonderful. So yoga is something that's become very important. I mean, it's not just with how you've really like kind of built this community. And created a company to really like propel that forward. But I'm sure that yoga holds a very special place in your heart, just like personally. It can be hard though, like when you have this passion for something like, like let's say yoga, but then you also are like operating and running a business. Like how do you balance that? I mean, because like maybe
Yeah.
like all of your attention kind of shifts to one thing, but then you have to also like nourish where the source is, right, for all of that creativity. But I'm just
Yeah.
curious, like, how did you balance that, or was everything just kind of like kind of falling back on itself
I
in
think
a good way?
I think that's when ADHD became my superpower in a way that I get bored if I'm doing something that I'm not interested in, or if I do something too many times the same way. And so every client was different. Every teacher I was working with was different. I had to do everything. I hired people along the way, but did everything from the marketing, which became bloomed into its own thing, down to the scheduling and the cleaning the floors and all of those different things. But I think I liked I liked balancing between things, but I also liked that the success, like if it was going well, I know that it was because of me, and the team that I hired and that type of thing. And almost in a way that is impossible in any other job I've had since, for it to feel so directly connected to what I'm putting in is what I'm getting out. So I think it was really rewarding and in a fun way to experience a lot, try, wear so many hats, try so many things, and figure out what it is that I really like to do beyond swimming. So,
Yeah, and I like how you said that ADHD became your superpower in those times of like, great change and just, different clients approaching you and trying different like just kind of like trial and error, like test mode of this and that. But through that process, learning so much. I think it's really important, and again speaks to how it's important for us to not only be um, like trusting of our body and like how we can use it and feel good, but also in this the kind of mental space, mental and emotional space of how we can really come to
mhm.
terms with like how do we learn, right? How do we behave and how to like what incentives do we need? And I think that's so important. And then you model that, right? Given the fact that you
Mhm.
were at the helm for so many years. So, you learned so much and accrued this wealth of experience, right? And you said that marketing would eventually kind of become a bigger focus and would, I would say, kind of bring you into the tech space. It seems like quite a shift because, my image of, like what kids yoga, it seems like all fun and they're kind of, going to different preschools and, now there's a seal involved. Just like that's awesome. But then tech, right? I mean,
Yeah.
right? It's like it's this larger kind of like seemingly, I don't know. How did you
Yeah, I can see
transition?
that. So my dad, when I was growing up, he was in education technology and he played many roles at the school that he was at, but technology was always one of the key things. And my brother was a computer programmer, and so I feel like tech was always at our house. And when we were having fun together as a family, we were creating videos using lots of different technology. Uh, we were using that kind of things. My dad was liked new gadgets, and so it was always something that was interesting for me. And I feel like almost became like a way of creative expression. And so it felt, even though I see how it feels like a jump, to me, it felt like a natural jump, where I also, as I meant, I get kind of bored when I'm doing something too long. And so when I feel like I've found mastery in something, I always want to bring it to the next level and the next level and the next level. And I feel like that's kind of what marketing in a way is. So the blend of marketing and technology together, actually, while running my kids yoga company, I created the first ever kids yoga app that was on the App Store. And yeah, which was super fun. This is like really 2010, maybe is the year. And I think the iPhone hadn't come out much, or the App Store hadn't really been released much sooner than that. So it was very simple. It was a set of flashcards where you could follow. If it was a lion pose, you saw a lion and you could flip it and you could see the like how to actually do the pose, and then my voice was recorded. over that, but it was super fun. It actually rose in the ranks of then iTunes U to become very well downloaded around the world. And I would get emails, a lot of them from, I would say, special education teachers about, wow, this is so great. Like, I love using this in my classroom. And that was really rewarding for me, knowing that the reach was continuing to grow over time. I also created off the heels of that, and with like the look and feel, created some kids yoga books that are still out there today. Yeah, so that kind of started my journey into figuring out branding and marketing, and was super hungry to learn more about that. And it coincided with a move we were making for my spouse's job. And so it was felt like a natural time for me to kind of up level. So my company still continued to grow, but I wanted to see how others were thinking about kids media and marketing. And so I started working on the side for PBS Kids and WGBH, which is actually based in Boston. And that grew into a full-time thing. And so my first yoga, you were asked in the beginning, how long did you run it for? And it continued on all the way through until the pandemic and started to dwindle then a bit, but my kids yoga books are still out there. But I started to shift gears, and when I was working with PBS Kids and WGBH, I was learning about the way that companies look at content that are for educators and for parents and families, and how they can embed all of the really great educational tools. And it felt like it mirrored really well the way I had approached the curriculum for my kids yoga, which was both this entertainment but infused with education along the way. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of the journey. And now that I'm in tech, I still focus in the education space, and always thinking about ways that we can continue to up level. And I've actually been thinking a lot recently with the classes that I know you and I are taking together. There's one around family engagement and family, especially as a mom myself, and family has always been a really important topic for me. And thinking about how I can use my marketing skills or apply, or like how could the connection of how important family engagement is for schools to the student outcome, how can marketing help to bolster that idea and that concept so that it becomes something that every household understands, and so like more families feel the need or interest in getting involved. And yeah, so back to like where my identity, and I think that I'm not quite there yet, but I all the pieces with technology and family and education and fitness kind of all swirling together.
Yeah, no, yeah, I like this swirling kind of imagery because you've done so much and you've accomplished such great things. And yet the way you talk about your story, like it's very clear the best is yet to come, right? Because of how you were constantly iterating on what your previous work has been, and you are not settling for just this is good enough, and thinking, how can the impact, the reach of my marketing, like tools and, campaigns, how can that reach more people in meaningful ways? And I think that's very exciting. And then I wanted to point out that, you said that, oh, like, so the company, right, in part because of the pandemic and probably other factors, but, it's not as, it's not quite where it used to be, but all of these yoga books, right, that you've created are out there. And I'm just thinking, like at the very beginning of our conversation, you said that initially you just wanted to write a kid's book, a children's book, or like do a kids show. So again, just like coming full circle, right? Just checking
Yes,
off
yeah.
different, dreams that you had early on, but never like the path was never, quite linear.
Yeah.
straightforward. Um,
Yeah. And since I think I've come to, I think early on when I was in my 20s, and maybe other people can relate, I felt like I need to know now what I'm going to be doing, or else I'm going to be doing the wrong thing. But I feel like I now know that, whatever I'm supposed to be doing will present itself, and I just have to put my passion and my effort toward it. And it will, like, the story will continue to unfold, and the right opportunities will come up if I just keep poking my head into the areas of interest that I have. So,
yeah, and I think nothing's ever wasted too, right? With as you mentioned, even with like the decision to go into to finance for a bit and realizing that that was actually crucial to then get you onto a different path. Um, and
mhm.
and yeah, and it's just amazing what you've been able to create. And this moment where you're right now working in tech and there's this focus on branding and marketing. Like I'm just thinking about how marketing is like it can just reach so many people. And when you think of it, especially in terms of like the larger tech companies and literally billions of people that they're able to reach, um, to think more of like how education can be positively affected by that I think is very important. It's urgent, right? So I'm curious, like, could you speak a little bit more though, like, because I'm curious to know this too, but maybe for my listeners, when you say marketing, what does that really entail? Because I think of like
Yeah,
advertisements or
yeah.
yeah, posters or
So, I mean, I guess marketing means lots of things, but it's everything from branding. So, what does the brand stand for? What does it look and feel like? What does it sound? How does it make someone feel? And to trying to create strategic pathways for people to build awareness, or for people to take action about something. So I think I like to think about it as storytelling. It's storytelling in the copy and the messaging that we write, but also in the visuals that we tell, and trying to catch people's attention. And what I love about, and marketing can feel icky in some ways, and there's a lot of schmarketing out there, but I feel like when, like, making the choice to make sure that things that I am marketing are things I'm really passionate about, and that I feel like I would get up to, like, be really proud if more people wanted to do these things or try these things. I think that is actually a really powerful place to be, and in a good place. So I know marketing gets a bad rap, but I would say that it's really been it's fun to think about in the education space, even more education proper. If there was more emphasis on marketing, how would that change things? How more, in what way would the audiences be more informed about the things that they need to know? And like, would people make different decisions about where they would want to be going to school? Because I think there, as much as many of us want to think that we're not fooled by marketing, I think there is. Your school and your district and everything has a brand and has a feel and a vibe and a community. And so I think there is some kind of branding, and marketing usually can help to tell that story in a way that makes people feel welcome, like they're a part of it. And so I think it's even more important than I had initially thought it would be as a crossover.
yeah, it sounds like from like the way you're talking about marketing, there's like there's all of these different messages that are, and, you know, that are kind of around us and things that we kind of like look at kind of like at face value and other things that are internalized and that we carry with us. That's really important. And is it about like trying to find a way to have your branding kind of rise above the others, or is there something about like with all of this kind of like in the atmosphere, finding like harmonies or finding ways to like kind of shift like certain frequencies where it can really kind of become that much more clear? I'm just, you know, in my head, I'm trying to make sense.
Yeah, I think so. Um, there is some aspect to marketing in some ways. Like you always have a competitor, whether you're a school marketing something or you're in tech marketing something, there is a competitive landscape. And these days we're competing just for people's time and attention with social media. Things flow by so quickly, right? Or with an email that might get lost in your inbox. And so I think there is a little bit of fighting for time. But I think it's also about just helping people understand, be aware of what you have, and feel and know how the brand or whatever you're offering is will make you feel. And it's about meeting people at the right moment in the right time. So if we were going to try and reach teachers, we probably would make a decision whether we should or shouldn't be reaching them during summer break, according to what it is that we were trying to share with them. So those are some of the types of things that we think a lot about, and like what type of words could we speak to somebody that will really help them understand what it is that we're trying to market, and will resonate with them and will feel like it will help them feel like we understand them as people and we understand their pain points. I think that's what it's all about. There's a lot of humanity. I studied psychology, and I feel like marketing and psychology are very aligned in a way that, again, I had never really considered when I was young and 20. But there's a lot of psychology and thinking behind it. And I love the humanity piece of it because, it's easy in some ways when you think about a campaign that you may have been your favorite ever. And I don't know if you rate marketing campaigns, probably not. But I mean, I pay attention to them because it's my line of business. But I do think there's some that really stop and make me think and make me feel something and maybe change a behavior that I wouldn't have otherwise changed. And I think behavior change is one of the hardest things to accomplish. So there's a lot of power in that if you can do it in the right way, and if you're doing it for good. So
That was amazing. I feel like you just gave a very succinct like marketing 101 right there. So thank you, Abbie. And yeah, and it's clear that like knowing the audience, having the right timing from that knowledge, and then presenting this kind of like vision or like what are we trying to put out there? All of these things and more can really have this impact, right? That hopefully is used in a positive way within society. I'm sure there's examples where it hasn't been so positive, but definitely, I imagine like with education, and then your, genuine concern to like engage more families, as you kind of began to articulate that more and more with our recent course. The possibilities are limitless, and that's very exciting. And so, thinking about in many ways, global reach of marketing and the ability to tell a story. And yeah, and just kind of trying to make sense of like how can we support more families within education. It sounds a lot like, this can tie into this concept of global citizenship. But is that something that you have ever like come across in your work with the children's yoga or with the tech companies and like other kind of like marketing spheres that you've like worked in? Has that ever come up, or is it something that you've heard in a different kind of like discourse?
I think that, I mean, there's so many, like yoga has a clear tie towards global citizenship. I think just with the messages and the teachings of yoga, it's about respect yourself, respect others. So I think that's been something that I've been trying to teach through yoga for a long time. And then moving along into the, children's media that is education driven. I think it's all about equity, of making sure everybody has access to something that's entertaining and educational and fun, and the background knowledge that they'll need to be successful, and hopefully pique their interest in something that they may not have otherwise. So I think those are all elements of, and I think overarching as you think about families and making sure they have everything they need and understand the power they have and what they can bring to the table. I think there's definitely a global citizenship tie there. And I guess when I think about maybe the first time I've heard the global citizen term, maybe was more about um, how when kids approach using technology, like making sure that they feel like they're being the right a citizen of this new space of technology, which is kind of an interesting concept. It's all of the new technologies that we get into. It's in making sure to introduce people in the right way and making sure that they understand the rules of the road and how the same global citizenship we experience in person can be applied in different ways. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate you starting with like the yoga piece because that, there's like such rich like philosophy and like, spiritual tradition that comes with yogic practice and that, respect is so important, that kind of anchoring of, before you can, respect others, like you really need to respect yourself too. There's this seemingly like duality, I guess, within Western terms of like me, them, like the other and myself. But really, there's this interconnectedness that I think is very prominent within like my limited understanding of yoga. And yeah, and then also the piece about equity and like ensuring access for children, especially within the media landscape, I think is so important because yeah, I mean like everything has changed like from what it was 10 years ago and then even more so the previous 10 years and it's a little bit like dizzying. I think a lot of parents, especially with young children, are quite nervous about what all of this will amount to. And especially with the technology piece, I know that screen time is something that a lot of people are worried about. And it's not even just for the children that they can't control their screen time. It's literally everyone. So there's
mm-hmm.
this sense that like, how do we, manage that with the technology constantly just trying to get more of our attention. So knowing where to put our attention is another thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm curious, like, is that something that you've thought about maybe specifically with like the tech side of like where these like like the advent of screens and kind of how much people use them, like is there a right or a wrong way to navigate that?
Yeah, I think that in my family, we like to think of active time on screens is an okay time. And active can mean lots of different things. So it can be we're all sitting together watching a movie as a family. That's an active thing because we're chatting as we're watching. And so I look at that as, as a good thing that we're doing together. I think that there's lots of things you can learn, but I do think it comes back to a theme that's kind of come across my career so far, which is the self-regulation piece. And I think I mentioned it really briefly earlier, but I believe that self-regulation is a literacy that everyone should be taught. And it regulating your body, your brain, your everything. But there's no one who really teaches that. So schools are not a place where you formally learn about self-regulation. At home, many parents didn't have that schooling, that would teach you self-regulation. So it's not something that fully forms on the parent either. But research shows that that kids who are more better able to master self-regulation at a young age do have higher outcomes in school. And so, and there's a piece about self-regulation and how do we help support people, and that means maybe knowing when your time to use screen time is up or when you need to move your body or many different things. And then this other piece about which I think gets back to all connected back to global citizenship, but I think if every family can help their kid be the unique special person that they are intended to be. Everyone has such a special thing that they can contribute to this world, but they just need to be fostered and nurtured. And so with the self-regulation piece, allowing them to kind of exist in a state of I don't want to say happiness, because happiness isn't what we're always going for, but in a place of feeling comfortable and ready for what the world has in store for them, I think that would help the world to solve any challenges that we have right now, or be kinder to each other, or some of those little elements. But I think it's all about helping each child, not just kids who have access to certain things, that everyone find their unique genius within them. And I think that contributes to the global citizenship, feeling stronger and like a more of a community.
Yeah, and going back to something you said before about how habits or behaviors really difficult to change. Not impossible, but definitely at younger years, it's great to instill certain, good habits. And definitely this notion that, self-regulation is important. I think the way you phrased it as like a literacy is really yeah, it reframes it, I think, in a proper way that, like, yeah, it's so important. And it made me think about this idea that actually comes from like Buddhist traditions of like being the master of one's mind. And that is, in different words, self-regulation. And yeah, and I think yeah, it's needed more than ever, definitely. And then this emphasis on like children just really uncovering what that special thing for them is and allowing them to like really go at it and thrive, I think is really beautiful. And ultimately, right, I think within global citizenship, like there's so many different people and there's such diversity on this planet. And there's no point in trying to like chase after what what another person is doing or what they stand for necessarily. I won't not stand for what who they are just as a person,
Mm-hmm.
because you yourself, right, are kind of constantly uncovering this more complete sense of like this is why I'm here, right? In a sense, your
Right.
mission. And I think that it needs to be framed as like a really exciting thing, right? Rather than
Right.
drudgery or I'm just going to put it off and not look that way because that's too scary. Let me just do this simple, like live this
It
simple
can
life.
feel very scary because it feels more comforting and easier to do something that your friend wants to do, or be just like someone who, stepped before you. Um but when you do have this understanding, and which I hope this next generation is starting to learn, is that like my job isn't to be like anybody else, it's to be myself, and that is what I have to offer. But it is a scary thing, and it's for sure something that I don't know that I didn't learn growing up. I don't know. I think growing up, when global citizenship was like recycle, and without any questions of whether recycling was being really effective, But I think this generation, and I see it every day with my kids and their friends and the people that I'm around, just how much more global citizenship is much more than just recycling. It is about uh, so many layers of thinking about other people, and what their needs are and what their wants are and how that works along with your own. So yeah, I'm really, really hopeful with this new generation.
Yes, me too. We have to be, right? They are the hope. And I think it's just important to also like point out the identity of like kind of stepping into this notion that I am a global citizen. Because it's not to it's meant to bring together and serve as more of like an additive kind of like spirit of like bringing in all these other identities, right? That yes, you can be a global citizen and a swimmer and a marketer and a mother and like so many other things. But that kind of like unwavering sense of like my mission, I'm like kind of blazing forth, and to like open one's mind and heart to the larger community, and how your actions really do have this ripple effect that we need to have we need to be mindful of that, right? Because now more than ever, right, this notion of our world just being shrunk, is just so much more
Mhm.
evident with, someone just kind of sending a message over social media, and suddenly, the world has changed, right? And
Yeah.
whether it was you who sent it or someone else who sent it, it doesn't even matter. You have to know how to live within this world with all of these
Yeah.
other people. And yeah, I know that, as a mother, you're very attentive to your own children, but I think it's incredible how you're also extending that concern, and that hope for everyone, right? All the world's children through the power of marketing. And I'm very excited to see what you come up with in the ensuing years. So, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I just love how we've gone from like swimming, and then we go to like kids yoga, we go to marketing, talking about tech. Like we're seemingly all over the place, but I hope that it's been clear, right? From how you've like shared that like there are some really strong through lines with all of this. And it's only in hindsight that we can really make sense of our own journey. So I appreciate you, Abbie, and wanted to ask a final question. And this question is comes in the form of a recommendation or a suggestion for the listeners. It could be either a book or a movie, something that you've recently, looked at, or you frequently go back to, that you find is relevant to the conversation that we've been having.
Can I recommend an app?
Yeah, of course.
So I've been using the 10% Happier app, which is a meditation app, and I have been using it for myself for a while. They have great sleep meditations that help me unwind at night, or it's everything from small meditations to longer ones. And then recently I started using them with my kids as a way to help self-regulate before bedtime. And it's been there are some more kid focused meditations, but for them, my 8 and 10 year olds, they seem to think those were too much for babies. So every night we've made a routine of listening to one of the meditations on the that app, and it's been a really fantastic bonding experience and opportunity to introduce them to something new. So yeah, that's my recommendation.
That's awesome. I haven't heard of this app, so I'll definitely look into it
And
myself.
I'm sure there's lots of other great apps out there too. That just happens to be the one that we've been using, but it's very very great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's incredible how like because this being a meditation app, um, we went from the very first app that involved or related with meditation being yours to now this newest one. But yeah, it's just wonderful to see how the landscape has changed, and how meditation more and more is really being taken seriously, and can lead to like this kind of like active, well, it's not the active screen time, but that the time that you spend with those you love, and all in the pursuit of really kind of being more in tune with ourselves. I think that's really
Mhm.
beautiful, and I want to practice that more myself.
Yeah, give it a listen.
Well, thank you so much, Abby. And I wanted
Thank you.
the last word. Any final thoughts, anything at all you'd like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
Um, I guess when you kind of sum everything up together, from yoga and being creative and tech and all those kind of things, my thing I like to try and encourage people to do is just try something new, whether it's meditation or yoga or um, something unrelated to either of those. Just give yourself the courage to try something new, give it 5 minutes, and you never know, maybe you'll love it. And I feel like it's like helps you explore a little bit about who you are, or do something someone else really loves, and yeah, give something new a try.